Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I see my glasses are reflecting quite a bit, so I'll
Oh,
put them up on my head. How are you?
good. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I have my family here and we have two dogs, so if you can
That's
hear
okay.
a lot of background noise, blame it on them. You seem to have daylight as well there, but it's like
Yeah.
11 a.m.
Yeah, is it 11 a.m. now?
Yeah, that's nice. So I understand your the last one was cancelled.
Yeah. Yeah, originally when I scheduled our first talk that we had to reschedule, I was hoping to
Yeah,
put aside a little longer than an hour. So kind of a
yeah,
little bit of bad luck and good luck at the same time, if you will. So
yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is really nice. I have to say, I have a cold, so I have to probably, I have a runny nose, so, but it's not contagious online.
that we know of. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's, yeah. I'm actually in our, this is let's say the calmest place here in our flat because you can see this is actually my son's room. So I can maybe, if you're going to record it, I can do like this. Yeah. So, but you've been keeping busy with the talks or
Yeah,
these
yeah.
one-on-ones. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, if I was a billionaire, I'd still be
Yeah.
doing this. So
Yeah.
that tells me something. And I'm doing it on my days off from my day jobs.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
But you're self-employed or
Yeah, I do a bunch of different things. I do about so I'm a one of my day jobs is a telemarketer. So I do
okay.
that about 30 hours a week. And then I also own a web design agency. But in this economy, it could be like pulling teeth to get clients. So I don't
Yeah.
do that only that full time anymore because
Yeah.
it's kind of a pain. But sometimes I get clients and I'm working on my own website. I'm working on a few different websites for some non-duality type people. But yeah, I'd like to transition into doing, this type of different types of Zoom calls with people full
Mm.
time. That would be nice. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think you have to. I mean, I'm a huge fan of intuition and kind of following what feels right. So
Not
yeah,
planning it so much. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, of course, there's always the rational side that I mean, you have to take certain decisions and you have to make money
And that
to.
side is the devil.
Mm, yeah, but at the same time, you have to be kind of satisfied with that compromise as well. So it's not
Yeah.
like just one or the other, but somehow
Right.
try to. I mean, we still have to eat and pay our bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if there's a bit of a delay here on the line.
Not that I can detect.
Okay, that's good. And if my I have two networks. This is stronger, but it's a bit unstable at times. So
Oh, okay.
if I disappear, I'll just try to reconnect and
Okay.
join in again and
Sounds good.
switch networks. Yeah.
So there's two main things that came to my mind. Usually I don't plan
Yeah.
these talks. Usually these talks are with seekers and things. I just whatever arises. But this is a little different. This is an exploration into some more of the subtle things here. But the two things that I was thinking about touching upon were that weird experience I had with the geometric shape of light and how that
Mhm.
relates to kind of some of the esoteric literature within Sogchan and things. If it does, or what to extent, whatever we can compare it to, because there's not a whole lot of people that I can talk to about that. And then the other thing was that you have been through multiple non-dual shifts in perspective. The first one, obviously, we would consider awakening. And beyond that, there's this deepening of emptiness, deepening of clarity, deepening of the embodiment of emptiness and clarity, and awareness,
Excellent
compassion.
topics.
So
yeah, compassion, I mean, that's a huge one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, where do you want to start?
I don't know. It's a daunting task. I'll let you guide it.
And in, let's say,
I have the easy job. I just sit here and let it arise, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could actually touch a bit on the background or the way I've been practicing and how I approach, let's say, the shifts and further awakenings after the initial one, because it kind of gives like a background to what I would answer on your first question about the shape hexagon thing, and also it touches quite a bit on my practice background and the shifts. So where would I start? This is in an easy way. I mean, if there's something that you, just as a start, if I'm using like too technical language, or there's something that you're not familiar with, please go ahead and interrupt me. I don't want this to be a monologue.
No, yeah, the way I see it is this is just impersonal clarity shining.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the impersonal, I mean, I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea that suffering is self-based. I mean, that we have this kind of like belief that we have this solid self, that I'm Helena, I mean, I've had these experiences and they've happened to me, and I was angry at this, or I can't stand that, or something like really tangible. And but the thing is that it's actually an illusion, that it's just like a bunch of learned in patterns. And the best way to see that there actually isn't this like solid personhood thing is that you really like super zoom in on when you, if you do like me, I, like really like heavy affirmations, and then you can get like a sensation like inside your body or just outside. There's no difference in on what, just choose the one experience or thing that feels the most, or that you sense the most.
That
And then
usually
kind of,
is sensed as a contraction of some kind, or a
exactly,
tension of some kind.
Yeah, like really like this pull that you're feeling, like you're shrinking, and this kind of anxiety, and this really really uncomfortable feeling, which and then you really like super zoom in on that one feeling, and then you like really investigate it, and then you realize there's nothing there, and then you take the next one, and then the next one that arises, and suddenly you can't find the self anywhere. And this is actually like the second part of the two-part formula for awakening. But
and the first part would be the saying of I, me. Is that
or
right?
actually the other way around, that this was maybe a bit backwards, that I told you about the second part first, but the first part is that you should know be familiar with the opposite feeling, that where the feeling where you feel nice and light and kind of this nice expansion. And then you kind of start to pay notice to that space, and you can't find an I or a self of some meanness in there. And then you alternate like between these two parts.
So would this type of two-part method be equally accessible for seekers and awakened humans, or is this something that most likely comes easier for someone who already had an initial shift, so that they can have that non-dual bliss as a comparison, or someone who has at least had a glimpse of the bliss of awareness being, or of Buddha nature, or of their own essence bliss?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically possible for anyone. It's just a question to get a solid understanding and experience of both modes. So actually, I remember that when I went through the guidance, one of the first things was that I had to drop off all formed ideas about what awakening is and kind of start from a clear table.
Yeah, definitely.
So not to kind of have your baggage with you, but just have an open mind and a clear
Yeah,
slate.
because it's not what the seeker's expecting.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then afterwards, it feels so obvious that, my God, how didn't I figure this out before?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you start to think that, my God, I can actually, I know I've had this feeling before.
Yeah.
Here and there, I mean, on those few occasions, but I wasn't able to put my finger on what it was, but it felt really nice. And then it was gone. So, but yeah, so I mean, that's the first shift.
And yeah, you were practicing this particular set of methods before awakening. So this actually, from your perspective, actually helped you wake up, and then helped you have multiple shifts even after that.
Yes, or actually, it helped me with the initial awakening. After that, in Pemakoku Buddhism, we have like another set of practices, but kind of this like analytical looking at the sensations and thoughts and everything that arises is kind of a really crucial point. You're kind of calling your own bluff all the time and not believing your own patterns and your own emotions. And that's actually an important, like the following shifts after the first one. So we have like the subject self, like the sense of me. After that, we have object selves. So the emotions that the me experiences. Okay, so then you've removed the subject, the self, but then you are left with the objects, the emotions. And this is, I don't think, I mean, it's like peeling an onion. You know, you take away the crunchy part,
pure,
like the crust.
and pure. Like, yeah, we hear about this in Kriya Yoga and different traditions. I love the onion because, you know, it makes you cry, but also at the very center, and it gets purer and purer and purer. And at the very center, there's absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
A little pocket of nothing inside.
Yeah, and the thing is that you're peeling away these layers of selfing, like self-based reactions. I mean, the grossest one is the sense of having a solid self, and then you have the awakening, and then you've seen through that. But then you still have these kind of reactions in your mind that you get angry, but it's not in the same way because it kind of lost the really
you might cool down quicker. You might not take it quite as seriously, but you're still flipping out, even though you're a sage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and that's where people are like, I mean, so I mean, it kind of makes sense that it's not the end. It's not the end stop. It's kind of like a starting point towards the end stop.
So it's like the end of the lesser journey and the beginning of the greater journey type of thing.
Yeah. So that's why. So we have like the object selves, and and with each shedding and like kind of peeling off each layer, you kind of it's not unlearn, but see through that the emotions that you're experiencing aren't, they're just, I mean, they're just happening. I remember once I got home, picked up the kids from kindergarten, they were hungry. I forgot my keys at home, so I had two in the afternoon after 8 hours of work, 1 hour commuting, two hungry kids, raining outside without keys. And I was just like, well, things happen. And I was like, where did that reaction come from? I would have been like pissed off, calling my husband and really like, oh. But yeah, so I mean, you kind of, get more mellow in that sense. I mean, something still arises, but it kind of it kind of loses the hook part.
Yeah.
And after that, you have like the subconscious mind, which is really like gray and foggy. And the thing is that, I mean, we're talking about, you're probably familiar with the collective subconscious. So it's not just about you, but it's about everybody else as well.
So we have a collective unconscious that has these humanity-based collective archetypes and collective themes and collective metaphors and collective symbols and
yeah. And that's, I mean, that's where kind of the compassion parts comes in. I mean, you can only get that far in your practice if you're just focusing on yourself. And the beautiful thing is that when you kind of shed the layers one after the other, you kind of realize that, okay, so you kind of see that you see the suffering of others as well. You see that they're going through the same shit that you went through, and they have their own reactional patterns that they're going on, and kind of like their hamster wheel that they're stuck in.
Yeah.
So it kind of it starts to grow on you, that you kind of see that other ones are also trapped. So it kind of grows naturally.
So there's this, you know, some people would call that the distinction between the arhat and the bodhisattva, or even the vajrasattva. And yeah, people sometimes try to call me a bodhisattva, and it doesn't, it feels on a certain level like a shirt that doesn't fit, because it's not, I'm not under the impression that that's something I chose to do.
Yeah.
It's just happening. And it's not even like the words selfish and selfless kind of blend together, because ultimately everything I'm seemingly doing is selfish. If I view myself as everyone and I go around trying to awaken, I'm just trying to end, you know, my suffering over there and over there and over there. But if it seems futile if you're like desperately trying to wake people up, but obviously just being available to be that interface and be interacted with, I think does have some kind of effect somehow.
I'm sure it does. And I think that there was actually a discussion about the intention and goals. I mean, just like half an hour ago in a Facebook group. And I think it's the intention, it can, I mean, the intention is good. And I think the kind of like the selfishness grows even bigger the further you progress. That's
and that's a core, that's a core aspect of the deeper, more advanced understanding of Buddhism, is that it's all ultimately selfish, not necessarily in a bad way, but that's why we're doing what we're doing. Is that you know, it's to end the suffering that you can end.
Exactly.
Directly.
And being helpful and generous doesn't mean that you're just going to lie yourself down like a mat or carpet for somebody else to step on. That's not at all. I mean, you can set quite firm boundaries, and be really I mean, it's like tough parenting. You just, at some point you just, I mean, you love your kids, but you just have to put set the ground rules, and and I mean, they're going to wreak mayhem else. I mean, so I mean, so, but I think the kind of like because compassion is really, really huge. It's like the cornerstone. So
it's like the key to Dzogchen in a way, right?
Yeah, and it kind of okay, now I got a bit sidetracked before, because we were talking about the energy system and the whole thing. But
sorry about
that. These are kind of like small discussions within the big picture.
Yeah.
But because there is this kind of untainted nature and untainted energy system within, which is covered by our delusional mind, we can kind of have these glimpses. So now I'm returning back to the second question that you had. So basically, and the question that you said about compassion and Dzogchen is there are like these ways how you can access that kind of pure, untainted part of your mind. And one of them is bodhicitta, or compassion, which is that you for instance, when we practice in Pemako, we dedicate the practice to the benefit of all sentient beings. And that's in the end, and also in the beginning, we ask for blessings of Guru Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, as she's also known, and Yeshe Tsogyal. So there we kind of
so the second Buddha and his consort, the one who brought the Tibetan Book of the Dead and foresaw it years ahead of time.
Yeah. So we kind of rely on their compassion towards us. And then we kind of show our compassion to everybody else with dedicating our practice. And so it's like, and this practice, I mean, just doing this taps and activates, and activates is maybe not the right word, but you tap in to the untainted parts of your mind. So you're kind of you're being the purest version of yourself just for a short second, for a tiny bit of time. But that makes really a big difference, because then you know that it's possible. Then you've actually experienced, even if for a short second, you've experienced yourself as the best version of you that you can ever be. And that, I mean, I think that's a really beautiful thing and experience. I mean, I think it's something because it's inherent in all of us. So you just have to be pointed in the right direction. So either with pointing out instructions, or then we also you do quite a bit of guru yoga, so where we chant mantras and really feel into the presence and really tune in on the gurus and how it feels in the body and how it feels in the mind. Because
so what's your opinion on like pointing out instructions for a seeker versus someone who's already had this shift in perspective? Like, how often does a person receive pointing out instructions after awakening, or is it usually done before awakening so they can kind of get a taste of it? Because I heard Sam Harris talking about how some tulku gave him pointing out instructions, and he said it was like his mind being threaded like a needle in a way that he suddenly had the ability to go into that state, even though it also might be the case that he hasn't actually experienced awakening yet. So it seemed like even as a seeker who can intellectually understand these things because of neurology and behavioral neuroscience and things like that, like, okay, there's no self, there's no free will, but even someone like him receives pointing out instructions and suddenly gains the ability, at least on some level, to to be aware of awareness in a sense. How do you see that play down usually with pointing out instructions? Is it usually for a seeker, or is it usually for a post-awakening thing, or is it just for anybody?
I think, well, I can speak only from my experience, from how we practice in our Sangha. We have on our retreats, for instance, they are, I wouldn't want to say non-stop pointing out instructions, but the getting everybody to know their own Buddha nature and how it evolves. I mean, it's not a fixed thing, because how I experienced Buddha nature, let's say after my second or third or fourth or fifth shift, is not the same as after the 13th or after.
So it reveals different facets of itself.
Exactly.
And so a deeper seeing.
Yeah, and it kind of starts as this emptiness in your mind, like this, like you feel calm or you feel like you're clear, and then it starts to kind of, then you start to feel it in your body, that it kind of expands, and then it expands outside of your body, and then after that, when you've kind of expanded it out to the outer edges, then you kind of really start to integrate it so that it kind of gets more, I would like to say texture, but it's emptiness.
So it's like a saturation of the magnitude of emptiness in Buddha nature.
And this is, I mean, this is the thing that you're tapping into with the pointing out instructions, but it becomes so much richer and has so much more flavor and essence and joy and love. And I mean, it's, I mean, if we think about empty, we usually like have an idea that it's kind of dead and dull and gray and black, but it's actually the exactly the opposite.
Right.
And
so it's the seeking mind that sees emptiness in that, through that lens, and that's not the case. That's what the seeker is looking for, is their own absence. And you know, a lot of these traditions talk about only emptiness, or some of the like Advaita Vedanta type traditions will say things like you know, Brahman doesn't have any qualities at all. And yet I find when Buddhism talks about it in its Dzogchen Buddha nature perspective, yeah, you know, everything said there actually does align with that. So in a way, it really does have qualities that we can kind of talk about, like,
and it's, I mean, it's like going from black and white TV to high definition 4K.
And it keeps getting more and more colorful and more crisp and vivid and beautiful.
And the thing is that then you also have like this surround sound, and you have this kind of
3D
vest
sound
on where you feel everything, and everything's just so rich. I mean, this is and it's not, and it's completely open in a sense.
It's all very inherently expansive and enjoyable.
And there's no self there to be found, so there's no confusion, and there's no
delusion.
So I mean, and this is the thing that we're able to tap into with these glimpses, and that's the kind of and emptiness. I mean, we can have you can use visual aids to go into non-meditation, like through your sight or through your hearing or through your touch. So basically you have emptiness in all senses, also in your sight.
Sometimes it feels like sounds like a joke, but it just something that feels like almost like wind moving through an empty head or something. It's just like there's just nothing there. There's just empty clarity, aware of itself. And you know, there's just this deep interconnected kind of this vast quietness. And it's just,
and I think you're really expressing and saying quite beautifully that, I mean, that what you're saying is that you're kind of aware of the awareness. So it's kind of self-cognizant. So you don't need the observer there to have the experience of
that's a good point.
And that's actually one of the characteristics of our clear mind. And then also that it's stable, so it's not fluctuating, it's not going here or going there.
Or at least you can effortlessly, seemingly at will, enter that. Whenever you so choose. Even though there's no free will, it seems like I can, whenever I want, I can just.
But that's actually a fantastic practice. I mean, in daily life, when you're busy and hectic, you just kind of try to switch it on.
Usually I do that right before my Zoom calls. Usually I'm you know, I'll sometimes I'll hit record and I'll just, kind of sit there and space out in that way, and just, be emptiness for a few minutes before the call begins. And that seems to, be more directly in touch with it.
Yeah. So if we think about how this associates then with the experience that you had, so we can have these kind of glimpses of the different aspects of our empty nature of mind. So this was a long prelude to the question, but I would say that's probably something related to the, let's say, visual experience of the empty nature of your mind, and let's say certain, you said it was above your head, so kind of certain
so there was
energy center.
It was almost like I don't know how far above my head, maybe 6 inches to a foot, something like that. There's some kind of it looked like a dodecagonal trapezohedron, but it very well could have been spinning so fast that it was simply a star tetrahedron with counter-rotating fields. It could be, but it wasn't something that was like around my whole physical body. It was something that was above it. And when it happened, I was in full Kachari Mudra, with the tongue above the roof of the mouth. And I was just spontaneously drawn. I don't usually, at that point, and even now, I don't ever really do formal meditation unless there's this spontaneous urge out of the blue telling me, okay, now go sit in full lotus, spine erect, all 4 bandhas, suck in the perineum, suck in the belly, put your chin to your chest, all these little body hacks that lower heart rate and help enter into a deeper meditative state. But then I did the Kachari Mudra, which I do feel like was pivotal for, or somehow connected to, the initial Kundalini awakening at age 24, and then this body of light experience, because it's something just told me to do that. And almost as soon as I did that, I saw that shape of light, and my mind went, oh, that's me, like more than this body. And it was the only experience in my life spiritually that was like, that had the flavor or feeling of, okay, I went a little too far, a little too quick. Like, that's a little terrifyingly simple. Like, it's this exquisitely beautiful shape, sure, but compared to the complexity of the human form, that's a very simple shape. And so it's kind of terrifying to see that layer of things be so simple. Terrifyingly simple to the mind. And there was still identification at that time. So this was 3 years after a full-blown Kundalini awakening, and 5 months before the initial shift in perspective we call awakening. So because it was only 5 months, I feel like it's somehow connected to the process leading to awakening. And yet I would imagine someone could still have experiences like that after awakening, but maybe not identify with it, because there was an identification there, even more than there was with the body. Oh, that's me, more truly, more correctly than this. And I also had the impression of, just like with the Kundalini awakening, in this case, it was almost like an astral vision. And there's only 2 experiences that this occurred in. That was the Kundalini awakening and then this body of light. And there was bliss in both, tremendous bliss, which somehow triggered the experience. And there was still the identification with that, but there was also almost like being in 2 places at once type of thing. And so it was the feeling of, the way my mind interpreted it was basically like, okay, the same way that I have a foot, a hand, and a head all at the same time, I'm also this shape and another layer of all this all at the same time.
Yeah, but I mean, that's exactly how it is.
Yeah. So it seems like, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be, but the thing is that the, let's say, glimpses or the experiences, as you kind of peel away the layers. So in our tradition, we say that we have 13 layers, like 6 in the head, and then the 7th kind of where you like.
So this is kind of like the 7th Bhumi area experience I had, seemingly. Yeah.
and so 7 until 13th, and 10 of these collect karmic traces, and 3 of them are kind of like inherently pure. So but with each shedding, and so we kind of first open them, like pierce through the layer, and then we kind of start and after
It
we've
makes
gone
sense, because another aspect of that experience I had was that it was spinning really fast and it was really bright, and it had the impression that it could create anything, almost like an infinite potential energy, but that it was creating this experience of this human and this seeming person. But it also had this quality of like, I could almost see inside it, but it was almost like it was obscuring its inner core from my awareness. And so that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. So it almost looked like a tangled knot of liquid gold in the center, just kind of swimming through itself. And I couldn't really see what was going on because it was spinning so fast and it was so bright. And there was something going on inside that. I could tell there was more going on inside it. And I could also feel that this energy signature still had some type of individuality. I remember thinking, I wonder if everyone's looks this way, but probably not if my mind immediately went, oh, that's me. You know, it wouldn't have done that if we all had the same exact shape. And then I had a mentor who was into Sogchen and things kind of say that he had seen this shape multiple times over the course of cultivating this, you know, year after year. And he said each time he saw it, the shape was slightly different, as if it kind of changes and evolves as we cultivate through those different phases.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's I mean these experiences, or let's say some might say unnatural, or that you kind of have this, you kind of get a thought, and somehow you kind of have like this premonition of something, or you kind of have I mean it's all part of when you're kind of shedding the layers and purifying your mind. It starts to happen spontaneously that you experience different things, but that's not the thing that you're supposed to kind of get hooked on.
Right. So we're basically talking about cities, supernatural magic powers, basically. So I guess that kind of falls into that category. So if the seeker chases just that, they're missing the point. These are just side effects of the real practice.
Exactly. And I mean, it's or seeing like orbs or something else. It's just the manifestation of the emptiness. I mean, it's just your sensitivity that's growing.
Right.
So I mean, it's not a self-purpose in itself to kind of try to. Or might be for somebody, but not for me.
Yeah, it's almost like a recreational thing or something. It's like
yeah. I mean,
like it's kind of fun, you know. It's interesting, but it's not the point.
Yeah. And I mean, just shedding all the layers of selfing and all the in the subconscious mind, and all the kind of learned in patterns, and the suffering that comes from experiencing all those kinds of self-based experiences. I mean, that's what I'm interested in eradicating from my life.
Right.
Yeah, and everything else that comes, that it might come or then it might not come, and if I experience something once, it might happen twice or then not.
Yeah, I think the main thing we're expressing here, and I think Ram Dass talked about this a lot too. He wrote a book called Be Here Now, and he had different experiences where he'd kind of, you know, he had psychedelic experiences and other peak experiences where he would, you know, get so many glimpses that it became frustrating after a while. And he thought, I got to do this the right way, the real way. And the real way is this subtle, gradual, you know, going up, if you will, but it's this background. It's more permanent than the glimpses. So even the deeper states of deepened awakening and the further cultivation of that emptiness and clarity and no self and compassion, it's a steady incline, but it's a type of background permanent cultivation. It's more of a stable foundation to work from than just these interesting glimpses the mind finds interesting.
Yeah, and if we're thinking about seekers generally or people meditating, I mean, I think one of the core problems is that they don't realize that the root cause for their pain and the source for it is in the experience of having a self.
Right.
So it's there. I mean, you're doing like I mean, for any practice basically, but not addressing the self is only a
Yeah.
temporary relief.
That's how I was as a seeker. I when I was very young, I found Buddhism and I totally jived with it. And every book, I'm like, yeah. Oh, wow. Because I was going to create my own system. You know, I had these intuitions, and then they already did it thousands of years ago, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then I'd go through, and then I got to no self. Oh, I don't know about that part though. I don't like the way that makes me feel. I'm gonna skip right over that. And then years go by, and there's that no self. I don't know about that. Let me skip right over that. And you find out you've been skipping over the key to enlightenment all along.
Yeah, and
Because the mind is programmed to be terrified of the key to enlightenment.
Exactly. Yeah, it really tries to defend itself and kind of makes you really want to avoid all the unpleasant feelings that you actually that's really, it's like a paradox, because it's actually the remedy, but at the same time you're really afraid of it because you don't know where it's going to take you.
Yeah. I like the way the Tao Te Ching puts it. They said, the self is gone without danger. You know, because it sounds like this spooky, scary, terrifying annihilation. It's not really that.
No, it's really not. And I remember I thought that, man, now I can breathe properly for the first time just after the awakening. It was like this weight was just taking off, and I was like,
for me, it was the body pain went away. For the whole experience, usually I'm in quite a fair amount of autoimmune joint and muscle pain, and there wasn't any. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't remember the last time I felt this comfortable as a body.
Excellent. Yeah. So I mean, it's so if we're thinking about my shifts and how I know that it kind of after and before awakening, it felt like I was living in a surround sound movie. Like I had these thoughts just like non-stop bombarding and impressions, and music was loud and the chair was shaking, and it was like this full body experience of life, like in a negative sense.
Yeah. The suffering was turned up to 11. Yeah.
Yeah. And then kind of then I realized that with each shift, my mind grew just a touch more quiet, and then the colors kind of grew just a bit softer, and the sound became just a bit less, or how do you say, the volume went just a few notches
There's like
down.
a distance. There's a distance.
Yeah. And then at some other, then they became like these sun bleached images, and then at some point they were more or less just like these passing thoughts, just like a cloud that just goes away and you don't associate with it anymore. And and it's actually quite an interesting experience, because at the same time you're kind of going from this one pointed focused view, like if I'm really looking at your picture, my kind of eyes go like really
the peripheral,
and then and not at all peripheral vision, but then with each shift you kind of open the sight opens up and opens up and opens up and opens up even more and more. And I actually heard that in the military, these special forces guys use this in extreme situations, that when they're afraid, the kind of sight, you get tunnel vision. And one of their tricks is actually to go into this panoramic vision. So to kind of to remove the kind of self is what you do with this also.
And that's something I noticed when I was younger. Obviously, I had experimented with psychedelics, and then upon awakening, I remember thinking what was different and what was the same. And one of the things that was the same was that the peripheral vision all becomes it's surprising what focus does to the mind in these tunnel visions. When you're suddenly fully aware of the entirety of the vision, and there's no real point of focus. It's just all at once taken in, kind of gestalt, all at onceness.
Yeah. And I think this is also a trick, because we're so focused on looking and searching, and we live through our eyes, and it's always outward.
Yeah.
It's always directed.
So any contraction or tunnel vision is this seeking mind behavior.
Yeah, when the solution's right in here.
Yeah.
That's that's I said at some point that I wish I'd focused I'm 41 now, and if I'd focused all the searching energy that I've put down over my past 20 years on external things, traveling, work,
all those hours,
all those hours, all that
be?
effort. If I'd only put it directed it the same way that I'm doing
tens
now.
of thousands of hours of seeking.
Yeah.
Mostly in the wrong directions, in the wrong way. Yeah. It's interesting how that works, because there's there's an element upon awakening of oh wow, I had this all along, and I actually knew what I was talking about all along. There's another element of oh my god, I can't believe I said this, as if I had any idea.
Yeah, but it's but the body knows. I think that the body recognizes what we've kind of because of our intellectualizing and over analyzing, and our rational mind has clouded. The body is really, really smart, because it knows when it's home. When you feel good, you even feel it in the body. So that, because there's a really there's we have this is we have kind of this absolute. We have the relative condition. The world that as we see it, our mind, our body, teeth, dentist, everything we have to take care of, going to the doctors because we have different illnesses in our physical body. Kids need hugs, sex, everything. So we have this relative condition, and then we have the absolute condition. But the trick is that it's really difficult to access the absolute, because we're so stuck in this relative form.
We're so used to the automatic habits of the delusion
selfing.
Of being someone. Selfing.
Exactly.
That's good.
So the peeling of the onion, the layers, it's like these Russian dolls, you have one bigger, and then you have a smaller one and a smaller one. So it's like that. So with peeling of the layers, you actually access the absolute easier and easier and easier, and you become the absolute. You kind of
bring it into the relative.
Exactly. And that's where form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So it's, I'm not a huge fan of quotes. I talk about my own experiences, and I'm really unscholarly. I've read books, but I graduated from university and so on. So, but in a let's say meditation wise, I'm a really pragmatic person. So it's about first-hand experience for me.
And that's, in my opinion, that's what the essence of Tantra is. In other words, the Tantra meaning the expansion of awareness and energy. It's pragmatism. And that's also where philosophy kind of ends, is pragmatism. What is actually useful?
Yeah.
So back, thousands of years ago, when they were doing these esoteric tantras and Tibetan Buddhism places and things like that, back then in medieval times, it was kind of, from their perspective, the most efficacious thing they could do is, these seemingly magical spell type rituals and stuff. But in today's world, pragmatism can take on all kinds of different forms, where we engage with the world in whatever is the most directly, simply useful manner, whatever it is.
Yeah, and if you think about lay people today, who has the possibility to go on a 5-year retreat?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's like a time and a place for each teaching, and I mean it's
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that so many people are putting in hours and hours and years of practice without really getting too much fruit from it.
Yes.
And I mean I mean I think it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
So
whole point of advanced esoteric Buddhism is the fruit of
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean it's yeah, I don't think I would have stuck with the Pemako practices if I hadn't seen that it actually works. I remember
Yeah.
my teacher, Kim Rinpoche, said that asked me that I mean maybe I was a year in or something like that after my awakening, and or was it maybe 2 years? I can't remember. But at some point he was like, "So how's your practice going? That do you think it's okay, or so how do you feel about the system?" I was like, you know, I have to get a first-hand experience before I can say anything. That I mean, I think it might work, but I'm not convinced yet. So
So
I'm not going to answer your question.
yeah, I'm not qualified to answer yet. Yeah, one way
No,
or the
no, but
other.
I mean, yeah,
So
that.
how long
But
did it take you? How long were you practicing Rinpoche Kim's Pomako Buddhism before you had your first shift, your first non-dual shift?
it went actually the other way around, that I had the guidance to awakening first, and then I got introduced to the practices of Pemako. So it was about half a year in between. But
Okay.
yeah, yeah. But I think, it's really. Mm, I thought I was practicing, but I really wasn't.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
kind of doing the moves, but
The seeker's best guess as to what this is. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And even if there was like this practice regime, the rainbow body yoga,
Yeah.
but I don't know, it kind of hit me, or put me. I have to open the window because it's really warm here. Yeah, it kind of put me in a quite uncomfortable place, that like the year after awakening, because um, I was kind of out of sync with everything around me, and I really
Sure.
didn't have the tools to kind of see and or cut through it. And I was just, I mean, it felt like I had like this, like like a resonance which was like really messed up. like like I couldn't like get my mind straight with everything that went around me. So it was like this almost constant. I mean, you've probably heard of Dark Night, but like this really long, rough period where I was just like really. I mean, I could see people's selfish behavior and their kind of messed upness, but I didn't have the mental clarity in myself. Wasn't. I mean, I couldn't establish a boundary between my
Yeah.
being and theirs. So I was just like having this.
So
I
you're
mean, it was
struggling to
really,
kind of exert will or have
yeah, and
agency even. I know what you
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like what they talk about, which is kind of silly too. There's aspects of Buddhism that get too grandiose, too poetic, when what we're really talking about is very simple and ordinary.
Mm,
And that's what I like about Pamako Buddhism as well. Is it's kind of this radical, somewhat rebellious. Even it's deeply linked to the origins of the tradition, but it's not bound by the gatekeeping of the politics of it all and things like that. So I really appreciate the freshness of that, and
yeah.
I have no problem being associated with that. Um, but yeah, there's I know what you mean by reestablishing boundaries and things like that. It's almost like you have to uh, be able to present a a very polished sense of self that doesn't exist. So it's almost like the more awake a human being becomes, the more they see there is no self. In another way, the more they can kind of manifest a perfect self, if you will, even though it's such a silly idea. It's almost like, yeah, it's more about boundary setting, things like that. They talk about, the bodhisattva wouldn't flinch if you tried to cut his arm off. It's like, well, I would.
Yeah, and
it's like, I know the reactivity threshold is different now,
yeah,
but I still, I don't mind appearing as, I don't mind appearing as a self, even though there isn't one. I don't know how to put that.
I think there's this tradition of radical honesty, or this kind of where you, regardless of your opinion, you have to be honest and express yourself
Yes.
honestly. And I think
Yes.
that's actually a really big part in not or in any practice, that you really kind of live up to your part, in a sense that the more you bullshit, the more stuff you still have to kind of see through.
The more you hide your stuff,
yeah,
how are we gonna cultivate beyond it?
Yeah, and that's actually a really, I mean, we're coming to a really interesting topic here, is that all the difficult times actually are the times when, or during practice. So any proper practice digs really deep into your mind. And it's not the practice that causes the tough periods and rough periods, but it's actually the thing that your mind grows clearer, so that you see the shit that you have in your mind.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that surfaces. And you're going to relive the same problems, the same issues, the same patterns, everything, until you see through that.
Until you stop avoiding it. Yeah, there's
exactly. And face
that's the
it.
other side of, like, because there's different types and different applications and different levels of Buddhism. There's plenty of people seeking and avoiding everything, and but the deeper practice is quite the opposite of that. There's the vast majority of any tradition is going to be seekers populating it, so you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and to say that everything's just happy, joy. That's not true.
Yeah, right.
If
that was true, nobody would ever seek enlightenment. Nobody would ever be doing any of these post-awakening cultivations either. So obviously, so that's one of the trick questions. Sometimes somebody will ask me, is this the end of suffering? It's like, well, it's the end of 90% of suffering instantly, and there's still this 10% of remaining stuff, as you would call it. There's still this shit in the patterns, these objects of selving, like you're saying.
And the subconscious mind, and this really subtle, it's like you think you're looking at the sky and the sky is really blue, and then you kind of know that there's this thin layer of clouds, but you just can't see them, but you know that they're there. So this is way forward, but still, it goes from like this gross to quite fine, and really fine and slippery, and
it's more and more subtle.
But it's, with all the pain comes a huge reward. So
a huge relief.
And huge relief, and the best thing is that no one can take it away from you. That's one thing. Even if somebody wouldn't believe you, then fine, it's their choice. But it's just something that's like awakening. Also, it's a permanent shift. It's not something that you can eradicate. It's not something that you can. The thing is that if you start to experience feelings after like a honeymoon period, it's just the next stuff that you have to address. And then you hopefully have a practice for it. and if
Right.
not, then it can be quite rough. And
So in that way, would you say that Dzogchen is only, Dzogchen specifically is only really geared toward humans that have already awakened? Or is Dzogchen itself somehow helpful at all for the seeker? Or is it only really intended or appropriate for post-awakening practice?
I think it's I think you have a connection to it or not. And if you feel drawn to it, you probably have it, like the intuition part we were just talking about in the beginning.
And you're probably also likely to be the type that would awaken.
Yeah.
So even if you are a seeker, it might still be helpful. And yet
Yeah.
I always knew from a scholarly perspective that Dzogchen was the highest, if not one of the highest teachings or secret teachings within Buddhism. But I knew it was non-dual, but I never really felt as magnetically drawn to it until awakening.
Yeah.
It seemed more obviously appropriate upon awakening.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the really big thing, is that not every practice, not everybody feels drawn to every practice. And I mean,
Right.
that's just the way it is. I mean, not everybody wants to be, I don't know, politician or carpenter or teacher or
Right.
whatever. I mean, it's just the same with the practice path that I mean.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yes, the world needs to function. So there's this diversity. You know, if everybody was the blacksmith in town, the town wouldn't function.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just that I think this is where we have this kind of connection to certain teachings, and I really think that there's something in it, and that you just have to kind of trust your intuition and see where it takes you.
So Pamako Buddhism specifically is like Vajrayana, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination. I mean, I
probably
can
more
tell
than
you
that
about,
too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I can tell you about, well, it's about establishing the nature of mind through different practices. That's we use guru yoga, so we kind of, our mind lingers with the guru's mind, and now I say guru in the sense of a past realized master, not
like
a living samsaric. Yeah, not a samsaric person, not our teacher, just to be quite clear, because I mean, those kinds of practices exist elsewhere. So we're kind of really tuning into the real deal.
And it's kind of it's got a kind of a grown-up vibe, if you will. It's an advanced practitioner type sangha, and it's again, it's not bound by the shortcomings of some aspects of tradition. So there's
exactly.
Or another way to put this is I heard a story recently during an Alan Wallace talk on Dzogchen, and he was talking about his lineage somehow along the line, but he was talking about this guy that actually kind of reminded me of Pamako Buddhism, and it was basically saying that there was this guy who lived out in I think it was East Tibet, and he was just kind of grew up in a small village on a farm, never encountered anybody or anything, and just started having spontaneous visionary experiences of every important Dzogchen master that had ever lived. And he's experiencing them in a non-embodied way. So he's having these visionary experiences. But the most interesting thing about it to me was that he was able to, even though he wasn't connected to a physical traditional passing down or gatekeeping scenario, that it was believed that this one individual and their visionary experiences and their little system that they spontaneously developed ended up resulting in between 12,000 and 13,000 humans experiencing awakening. So in other words, it worked, even though it wasn't passed down. It in a way, it worked better because of the way it spontaneously arose in that way. And Pamako Buddhism kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, and I mean, we have Dojom Lingpa, who also had this kind of same he didn't have any physical teachers, but they kind of just came to him. But still on Pemako practices, so we have the Guru Yoga and it really like feeling the effect in the body and in the mind is really important in all the practices we do. Then we do dynamic concentration, which is like really sharp, focused, not like this 5% concentration, but like really like 100 or 80%, like really cutting through and repeatedly. And then you sit in non-meditation. So that's where kind of the Dzogchen part comes in. And then when you kind of feel your mind drift away, then you just, again, with a sledgehammer or a knife, you just cut through again. Then we have the rainbow body yoga, which is a series of different mantra with different syllables.
And is that the practice that you would think would lead to more experiences of that geometric shape of light type experience? Would that be the rainbow body yoga, or what experiences, or just the whole system in general?
The whole system, but because the mantras, you require an initiation for the mantras. I think, I mean, it's not impossible to do without the mantras.
But it might not be as charged. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it would then be kind of like a sutric and not a tantric way, but kind of to rely on the presence and the insight and the clarity of mind of the past masters is really helpful. So you're not kind of flying solo, but you have like the support like from their side there.
Be like a practice run.
Yeah.
Kind of a dress rehearsal type practice until the charge is there.
Well, or actually, it's not even a dress rehearsal there. It's kind of like throwing you in the cold water in the deep end.
Oh, I see.
So it's like really, I mean, it's really powerful, and it's really because it's the charge of both wrathful and peaceful deities and Buddhas, so that it kind of addresses all the different aspects of selfing in the layers of our mind, which is really, so it makes it super effective in let's say the practice space. So but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure you would experience exactly the same thing, but I'm quite sure that you will progress if you decide to take on the practice and have maybe other types of insights or experiences.
And again, not that those are the goals, you know, obviously these are just a distracting side effect of, so in a sense, it might be an indication that there's cultivation occurring on obvious, yet subtle levels. But again, that's not the point. The way I said that made it sound like that was the point. Like, then I'll, I thought, no, that was silly. That's not what I meant. So I felt the need to clarify there.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's but there's really nothing that compares to having a calm mind and kind of experiencing.
Nothing in this world that this is like.
Yeah, and then you kind of also become more aware of the world that you're living in, because you're not seeing it through these selfing glasses or filter, but you're actually experiencing it in a really pure way. And you're not placing labels on things and experiences, and it's not as tiring, because that's a really good way
There's
of
a conservation of energy. There's no wasteful flailing around dramatically, and so there's just extra energy.
And there's no friction, because the friction between you, I mean, I'm talking the physical being and your mind, it grows less or smaller and smaller, the friction. So it really makes everything so much more easy.
Yeah, it's funny because to the seeking mind that might not compute, but basically what we're saying is the further along the post-awakening path you go, the more and more effortless it is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point of Dzogchen as well, is that, or the way I would put it is, sometimes people talk about sages, you know, like surfing. the waves, you know. And really what's happening is this professional grade surfing is just occurring. And it's not something we're doing. It's just something that's occurring. There's this clarity that's just happening, and we're kind of along for the ride in a way as this impersonal witness that is just not the observer, but the observing, the background gerund awareing.
The awareness.
Yeah, it's the thing in the non-duality community. They get freaked out when you use the word awareness because it sounds like a separate thing that's a noun, but that's just the shortcomings of language to explain what it is we're talking about. It's not that the perspective is wrong.
And this is actually the tricky thing between the relative and the absolute conditions. So how to flip between talking about one or the other. And that's, I think that's where it gets really really confusing at many times, because we have to approach the absolute from the relative. I mean,
I think that's the biggest problem in the radical non-duality community, is that the frustration of when a sage flip-flops in that way, and it's kind of disorienting to the seeker, which can be helpful, but it can also be frustrating. And so a lot of people in that community, a lot of the seekers, are very desperate for some kind of method, and that's part of the reason I'm kind of looking into Pamako Buddhism, is to experiment and see, you know, can this help a seeker wake up? Can this actually help deepen the awakened experience? And I'm sure it can. It's very interesting to check it out. Yeah, that's the thing that's the most important and interesting to me. Is that I saw a poll you had taken in one of the groups, and it was, how many people have used this 2-part method to actually wake up? And there's quite a few. I think you said personally around somewhere like 50, right? That have awakened in that way.
Most of them are in our Sangha. So but it's some 40 to 50. But now I also, with the poll, learned that not all of them had awakened through the 2-part formula. So we might take maybe 10 away, but still.
So maybe 40. That's still pretty good. How long has this been around? When was Pamako Buddhism kind of structured?
Kim Rinpoche has been teaching for some 10, 12 years. So it kind of has developed and grown over the years, and kind of restructured itself and found newer, better versions of itself. So, but in this constellation, 4 or 5 years, something like that. I'm really bad at numbers and remembering when what happened.
That's because the intuitive part of your mind is more dominant now after awakening. It's one of the. It's funny because, you know, a lot of people that wake up tend to be these brainiacs that are extremely intellectual, extremely intelligent, and then upon awakening, they no longer view that as very important in a way, or clearly not as important as the flowing intuitive ease of the other side of that. And so there's different kind of sub communities within Pamako Buddhism. And for example, you are the Sangha leader for Finland, correct?
Yep. Yeah. Can you just hold on a second, Andrew? My daughter's just here, so that's why I flipped the camera. Okay. I have like 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
No, sorry. Your question was so about me being the Sangha leader in Finland.
You're the Sangha leader for Finland.
Yep. It's a really fancy title. So we have practitioners more or less around the world. We have a few in the US, in the UK, in Ireland, in Russia, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Switzerland, where else? Yeah, well, might be somebody that I forgot, but I mean those are the the active ones at least, and I think it's a fantastic group of people because we can, as we said already, that it's a pragmatic approach. So we talk about everything from attainments to difficulties during practice. I mean, whatever
I'm
you
not
want to share is okay.
Yeah, right. That's good. There's a radical honesty, a radical openness, a radical
Yeah.
safe space to
Yeah.
share all that, which is absolutely wonderful. And
Yeah.
I'm not obviously after awakening, I'm not, and obviously I'm kind of a non-duality guy in that community, so I'm kind of at a distance from techniques or methods or practicing, and yet I'm also at the same time not bound by those limits, and I feel the urge or the draw to Dzogchen. And specifically because of my radical rebellious nature, I do think that I'm going to experiment with Pamako Buddhism and its practices and see what happens.
Right. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, I hope it's something that resonates with you, and yeah.
Seems to be so far, yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, I'm grateful that you found me and we connected online, and I'm grateful that you shared this community with me, and I'll definitely explore it, and we'll probably have a follow-up chat about it. And
yeah,
I
I'll be
appreciate the
happy.
call, and it's
Yeah,
always a pleasure to talk to you.
thank you, Andrew.
So I hope you have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
We'll talk again soon.
Yeah.